For 5 seasons, the rains failed. Crops withered in the fields, and tens of thousands of heads of livestock across the country died. The losses and damage estimated at 35 billion shillings. It was the worst drought that Kenya had seen in 40 years. And now, as the country begins to recover from that drought, we begin a journey of documenting these impacts of climate change across the country. And we'll not just tell you the stories of devastation that the people suffered, but we'll also tell you the stories of resilience and the hope and the solutions that the communities are putting in place, so that when rivers such as this, Murang'a River, begins to reduce into a trickle because of a drought, the people still remain resilient. This is Earthwise. My name is Zana Bwandati, and we begin in Murang'a County.
I grew up in the village of Nyakatogo. Our homestead was surrounded by streams. As a child, I played with mud, I chased the frogs in the streams. And of course, there were a huge number of beautiful butterflies that we could play around, a lot of caterpillars from the waterbuck trees. Today, when I go with my children to the village, they have no butterflies to play with. The streams have all dried. Even what was the mighty River Gondo, which we could not cross. Today, we walk down through the river without having even to lift our trousers, simply because of the adverse effect our climate has had on nature. The fauna and flora of Nyakatogo village has completely changed. And when I think about my grandchildren, I wonder what world they will see when they go to Nyakatogo village.
I had to stop doing strawberry farming for a while because of lack of enough water, and at the moment I could not start a irrigation system. I was depending on a certain river, and then it dried up. After it dried up, I could not afford to get water, and I could not afford to have tapped water. There was no available farming water around, you see. So that project, and it was so important to us as a family, we had to drop it and now embark on avocado and coffee farming.
The past two or 3 years has been quite challenging because you've not been receiving enough rainfall, and so whenever you plant, you do not get good harvest.
Now let's learn a little bit about Murang'a County. Here, agriculture is the backbone of the economy, just like the rest of the country. And here, at least 90% of the population is involved in various agricultural activities. This county has 3 agroecological zones, and the western side is the driest and suffers frequent dry spells and water shortages because it receives less rain. Now, because Murang'a is an agricultural county, the intensity and frequency of the rains matters a lot. But according to the Kenya Meteorological Services data, it's not looking good for Murang'a. According to the data, 1997 was the year the county received the highest amount of rainfall ever at 1,600 millimeters, and this was because of the El Nino. But the very next year, the rains dipped to the lowest ever recorded levels of less than 400 millimeters. And this is because of the La Nina, which is a phenomenon that often follows the El Nino. But by 2021, the rainfall was not as bad as it was in 2000. But according to Kenya Met, it's still not impressive either. Weather forecasting is a key element in the fight against climate change, because without information or without data, then farmers or the communities will not be able to know how they can prepare or how they can know what to expect going forward. So in Murang'a County, we're just about to talk to the Kenya Meteorological Department to understand exactly how climate change has impacted this county and what this means. Because remember, Murang'a is a very significant county when it comes to water, delivery of water to Nairobi County. Nairobi heavily relies on Murang'a. So if there are problems in Murang'a, then the capital, Nairobi, will definitely feel it. Welcome, Paul. Thank you for speaking with us.
Thank you.
First, maybe tell us a little bit about yourself. Who are you? What do you do? How long have you been doing it?
Okay, my name is Paul Murang'a, working with the Kenya Meteorological Department for my career. That is for the last 23 years. First as a meteorological communicator, then as a meteorologist. And from 2014, I was posted here in Murang'a County as the County Director of Meteorological Services.
So tell us a little bit about Murang'a County. We know its significance and the role it plays in keeping the capital, the thirst in the capital quenched. Yeah. What is the state of climate change in this county?
There is an increase in rainfall from the statistical data. There is an increase in rainfall, which we have been attributing to enhanced agroforestry, but the rainfall is so varied that it varies. You cannot, now initially, that is traditionally, we used to have the start of the rains, which we call the onset of the rains, on 15th of March to 20th, that is for the long rains, and then October 10th to 20th for the short rains. But these days, the variation of the change of onset, which has highly impacted on the crop calendar. Because if you find that the rains are starting within 2 weeks later or in the month of April, and the farmers had already planted, they are forced to replant. So one of the few things is that the agroecological zone, the upper zone, that is where we have the extreme rainfall, we have the landslide, we have the source of the rivers. The middle zone, which is characterized by coffee farming, which is mixed farming, there is also the increase in incidences of landslides because of the subdivision of land and also because of the habitation.
Yes, I remember a couple of years back when the landslides were really a big deal. We did come to Murang'a to go do that story, and what we found on the ground was quite heartbreaking.
2018.
Yes, and we met a couple of farmers who told us literally the entire land has shifted into the neighbor's land. So what are those areas looking like right now?
One of the few things, you know, there are several causes of landslide, but Murang'a is rainfall-induced landslides. Say that because we have reached a deep alluvial source. Say that you can imagine in 2016 when we lost a day in Kegumo, the landslide uprooted the blue gum eucalyptus. Can you imagine this? We always talk about the deep-rooted, the plant deep-rooted, but it uprooted. So we have very rich alluvial source. So when you accumulate the rainfall, that's why we usually issue the trigger that the soils have reached the saturation, therefore they cannot absorb anything else. So at the moment, the cracks are still there because the cracks develops.
So one of the risks of more.
There is a risk of that, but I like the way the farmers have adopted to agroforestry.
Na hii ni plate ya gauge. Kwa hivyo mimi usoma hizi namba na zimeanzia kule kwa mto zikaja mpaka hapa. Yaani mto ukifurika mimi huwa najua kulingana na hizi namba zimeandikwa kwa plate. Alafu naandika na watumia ama wanakuja kuchukua kwangu nyumbani. Hiyo ndio kazi wamenipa. Na hii mto uto Murang'a River na usaidia hasa watu hutumia maji kwa ukulima, hutumia kwa kunywa, kuonyesha mifugo na njia zingine.
Hata hii cassava iko. You see, there is a diversification.
Oh, this cassava is huge.
Because my wife should buy.
Hey!
Imagine that cassava. Yeah?
This is
when we are talking about drought tolerance.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you know cassava does very well in Western Kenya.
Exactly.
I've never heard of cassava in Murang'a.
Yeah. You know, one of the few things when you
now the weather is becoming conducive for cassava.
No. It has been conducive, but we need the mindset of the community to change. Because watu wakisikia kuna mena hii, they think because you are poor. You know, that is one of you need all to change.
Yes,
and you can imagine this a tree but is not affected so much.
Yes.
And once you never see that watu wanatupa hii at the Mekosa market. So these are some of the few things that adaptation.
So hiyo ni plant moja imetoa hizi tatu.
Imetoa tatu. Na unaona pale wana harvest tutapata shots zingine pale wame harvest. Yeah, and because there is ready market. So we also need to change the mindset of the community that these orphan crops, they are drought resistant, they have the market, they offer the same starch like maize.
Like maize.
We need to move from like a very way of
and the ugali cassava is even
better. Yes. So this is the mindset that we need the community, the Kikuyu community. I like to tell them that they should adopt from this.
Lucy is the owner of this farm and she allowed us to graciously use her farm for this episode, and we found her harvesting cassavas actually, and these are the cassavas that have come out of her farm. Just see how huge this cassava is. She said she got the seed from the Kenya Agricultural Livestock Research Organization, and this cassava has been in the field for 1 year. And one thing we've noted with Lucy's farm is that her maize looks kind of different. The maize behind her looks smaller and yellow, while the maize on this other side is very healthy. So we just want to talk to her a little bit about that to understand why that is. Lucy, asante sana kwa kutukaribisha.
Karibu sana.
Sasa tuelezee kidogo kuhusu kilimo hapa. Hii mahindi na hii tofauti imekuwa kwa nini?
Wacha niseme sijui tofauti juu hata hii ya green na yellow niliweka mbolea pamoja, nikapanda siku moja pamoja. Sasa sijui kwa nini imegeuka ikakuwa yellow na ikageuka ikakuwa.
Na mbegu ilikuwa same?
Mbegu ni same.
Na huku mvua ikoaje huku mvua?
Tuseme ininyesha mingi kwa wakati moja alafu ikakata.
Na imekuwa hivyo miaka zote ama kuna msimu mvua imekuwa vizuri?
Kuna msimu mvua inakuwa mzuri, tuna harvest vizuri, lakini kwa wakati huu ilikuwa mingi kwa kuanzia, lakini ikakata tu mara moja.
Umeishi huku miaka ngapi?
More than 20.
More than 20. Tumezungumza na huyo afisa wa Kenya Met mwenye ametuleta hapa kwako, na akasema wako na hizi programs zenye wanatembea wakiambia wakulima kuhusu climate change. Wewe umeambiwa climate change ni nini?
Yapatana na wao.
Hujapatana na wao bado? Kwa hivyo hujaisikia neno climate change?
Nasikia lakini sijapatana na mtu one on one tuelezane.
Na mwenyewe kwa maono yako unaona inamaanisha nini?
Climate change. Inamaanisha climate ina change.
Na umepata labda kujua ni vipi wewe kama mkulima unaweza kujiprotect na hii climate change ndio usiathirike vibaya? Bado. Kwa hivyo unahitaji kukaa chini na huyo afisa wa Kenya Met kuelezea zaidi.
Nielezee.
Uhoro ugaruruku wa rĩera tene rĩrĩa twaciarirwo rĩkarĩ tene kĩmera kĩrĩa kĩnene kĩambagia mweri 15 ngeririkana nĩwakoragwo ũĩ twahandagĩrwo ha gĩtiko no nĩ ũndũ wa ũgarũrũku wa rĩera rĩmwe nawe nĩrorete gũgũkandara rĩmwe nĩ mbura nĩroka tene na rĩrĩa rĩngĩ gũkecereirwo na nĩrĩrahutia kĩmera kĩanyu harĩ rĩu nginya rĩngĩ tene ndwakoragwo ũkĩgũra gũkĩhandwo mbembe ndwagũraga ndawa ya fall armyworm na rĩu igũranagĩrio hamwe mbembe nĩ irathecwo nginya irio mũgũnda kana mbegũ rĩu macio nĩ maũndũ marehetwo nĩ ũgarũrũku wa rĩera toguo ugire mbura ĩgoka rĩmwe inene rĩrĩa rĩngĩ ĩgoka inini na ĩgathiĩ thikũ nyingĩ nĩcio twĩtaga ndĩkaigua he mbura yaura kwagĩa thikũ 10 gũtaurĩte na rĩu ako nĩwonaga gĩthĩ o ũguo mboco ikahutio na igatuĩka ikahoa.
Uko na maswali yote kumuuliza?
Anataka haya rĩu arathia cio arĩra acio kana raiga tũgathikagĩrĩria kamemeri uyu mweri ona ũrĩmwe tuge ni no mataga kũmenya makaiga rĩngĩ mbura kura rĩna ikaga kura tondũ ona igũrũ nĩ rĩo rĩkiugaga mũno rĩu bata no kũmenya atĩrĩrĩ ũikare ũharĩrĩirie mũgũnda in case mũthenya ũrĩa mbura kura we ũhande.
Tugaga atĩrĩrĩ mbura yuma hakuhĩ Jehova ithuĩ tuyo control maũndũ mothe ũrĩa ũgĩtĩini rĩu ũgarũrũku ũcio wa rĩera rĩ twakwĩra mweri ũmwe mbere rĩ no kũgarũrũke nĩkĩo twendaga gũkuongerera ĩngĩ ũguo auga ũgakorwo harĩirie mũgũnda tayarisha shamba yako wakati walakini siku ya kupanda ngojea kidogo kwa sababu nasikia tukitangaza sasa panda wiki ingine kunaanza walakini hiyo ingine huwa tunasema mwezi moja mbele yaisabadilika na ndio huwa kila wiki tunaongeza ingine. Nitakupatia namba ya afisa wa kilimo wa huko kwa sababu sisi tuko wachache katika kaunti wa hapa kwenu ambaye atakuwa akikupigia mpigia ama uulize atakuwa akupatia jumbe yangu ya utabiri hali ya anga huwa tunapitishia hata kwa mashifts.
So we've talked about the problems and the challenges that people are facing here in Murang'a County and how the government through the Kenya Met and the Ministry of Agriculture are trying to fix that problem. But what are the people themselves doing to climate proof themselves? Climate Hackers is up next. When we spoke to Kenya Met earlier, they mentioned the need to have farmers growing the right crops, growing the right varieties, growing at the right time, and paying attention to those weather forecasts as given by Kenya Met. And so, in practice, we are going to speak to Maina Wambugu, who is an agronomist, to tell us exactly what this looks like on the ground in Murang'a County. Hi, Maina. Thank you for making time for us.
Yeah, thank you so much.
So you've been working in the climate space for more than 20 years.
Yes.
What have you seen about climate change in Murang'a County?
Originally, arrowroots would grow very well along the riverbeds. And now there are challenges that even when we have water, we are having less and less of arrowroots. But one good thing is that farmers now recognize that they can now have more arrowroots in their diet than before. And now they are becoming more scarce than they were before. The prices are going up higher just by farmers realizing that they need these kind of foods that are slow in growing, that do not need a lot of rain, that do not need chemicals, and they are less susceptible to pests and diseases. Yeah.
The nature of how arrowroots grow is that they need somewhere wet in order for them to grow properly. But the climate change making the rainfall pattern less and also reducing the amount of precipitation that is hitting the ground. How can farmers navigate that in order to grow arrowroots? Because
we have less and less water within the riverbeds, then one of the ways to see that they have arrowroots is to support the growth of arrowroots that don't need a lot of water. You can actually grow them on dry land and they grow and become very good arrowroots. Yeah. So
in the 20 years you've been in this space and as an agronomist, have you seen any crops that have disappeared because of climate change?
Well, if you look at, for example, we had the locust kumawiki. And the locust kumawiki is that anytime you would want to grow them, you just get a piece of it, put that into the soil. That is disappearing. Then we've had varieties of maize, and particularly for central, we had a maize variety called Gedigo that would really withstand drought. All these are disappearing, and instead we are finding new varieties that need water, they need more care, and you have to support them grow. Yeah.
Now that you're mentioning Sukumawiki, there's Sukumawiki all around us. This is not the local variety?
Well, this is part of what we are encouraging farmers to grow. Unfortunately, the local Sukumawiki we had in the past would actually encourage also a lot of seeding. Now these ones, what happens is that sometimes they grow, and then within a very short time you are going back to the market to buy more. However, because farmers like Sukumawiki, then we are asking them to grow other crops like the black nightshade, things like the sweet potatoes, the amaranthus, it's called mito. Those that really can withstand dry weather.
We have been forced to learn new ways of farming, and as we look forward to still continue learning, which is is not really available here in our county because we don't have extension officers going louds of our farms. We solely depend on our Google and maybe from those people who have a know-how, slightly know-how, because we don't have available people to enlighten us on how we should deal with it.
Hapa nalima mboga ya managu, ndio hii, na tena napanda mboga ya sukuma na hii ingine ya telele, na inanisaidia sana juu hapa kwetu Murang'a tuko na shinda ya climate change na ilianza kitambo. Sasa mvua ilikuwa inanyesha tu kabla chakula ikomee, mvua inakosekana. Sasa inatubidi kulima kwa maji. Sasa hii shamba yangu nilikuwa najaribu napanda mpaka hizi tunaziita pumpkins. Naona pumpkins hii ni chakula ya haraka na inatusaidia sana na tena iko na manufaa kwa miili yetu.
Tumefanya integration. Hii ni hybrid, hii ni indigenous. Hii tunaita Kikuyu seed. Hii ni hybrid pioneer. We are doing integration for us to get yields. Because if we rely with the hybrid, we will get lesser yields. Yeah.
One of the areas of climate adaptation, they introduce fruit trees. Fruit and fodder trees, because for example, we are having a problem with the exotic trees because these days we are not warming our houses with those the traditional way. So when you plant a fruit tree as an adaptation, in case you have crop failure, you will sell the fruits and the tree will still remain on the farm holding the soils.
This is a banana trunk or banana stem. You can make a hollow out of it, and there you can plant your beans. And it stores a lot of water, and no water is wasted. If you plant a lot of crops that have cover crops, it basically also tells you that you're able to preserve a lot of moisture.
Did you know that nearly all the 47 counties of Kenya have a climate law in place, built on the Kenya National Climate Law? Well, Murang'a is among the counties that have a climate law in place and also has a climate fund, just like many other counties, which seeks to dedicate at least 2% of its county budget to fund climate response measures and climate adaptation activities. Another thing that's being implemented in the county is the FLOCA project, which is the Financing Locally Led Adaptation Project, funded by the World Bank to push for adaptation activities at the very local level. On-farm water harvesting and adoption of climate-smart agriculture are also ways that farmers in this county are adapting to climate change.
The agriculture industry is vulnerable to the impacts of climate change and in fact suffers some of the worst impacts of climate change. Yet it is also responsible for carbon emissions, at least 18% of carbon emissions. And so farmers are faced with the struggle of surviving these impacts of climate change while doing so in a way that leaves the least amount of carbon footprint on the environment. So in Murang'a County, we've seen farmers who are doing exactly that. And Murang'a is the first county that has an agroecology policy that seeks to have their farmers adopting climate-smart agriculture in an environmentally friendly way. Afterwards wraps it up in Murang'a County. My name is Zena Bondati. See you next time.